Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Mind the Flat. I'm Chris Heffernan.
I'm Tom Crowler.
And I'm Amy Isles.
And today we're going to be discussing radio, TV and film. Which ones do we listen to and what is the best and where's the future going in TV, radio and film? So to start us off, Amy.
Oh gosh, I feel like I've been put on the spot.
Your favourites from across those three. And when we say radio, we're also going to go into podcasts as well.
I don't really listen to a lot of radio, but of course my favourite podcast is Mind the Flat. I feel like I'd be chucked out of the flat if I didn't say so. But aside from that, I actually listen to a podcast done by George Ezra, and he gets guests on, and he's had all sorts of guests. He's had Elton John on there, Sam Smith, Ed Sheeran, Niall Horan. He's had, I think he's doing one with Craig David. He's on his second series of podcasts now, and they are so interesting and learning about kind of the music industry. Something when I was a lot younger I was kind of more interested in, but kind of getting that human response from those musical artists is amazing. So, Tom, I feel like this is more your kind of area, not necessarily radio, but in terms of podcasts, you are the podcast listener of the flat.
That's a bit sad, isn't it? There's three of us making a podcast here, and I'm the only one that really actually properly listens to them. I've got to say, Hello Internet. It's a bit of a niche one. Not many people will know it, but it's two guys that are kind of like educational YouTubers, and they pretty much just chat for an hour and a half, and
like us.
But it's developed. It doesn't really follow a format though. That's the thing. But it's just like developed from the first episode. They're on like 100 and something now, and it's kind of got a bit culty. Like everyone has like loads of in jokes and that sort of thing, and so it's kind of inaccessible to most people. But I really like it.
You have to listen like from the start.
From the start, very much. Okay. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Go on, Chris.
Well, see, I think podcast-wise, that the ones that are particular is I think quite a popular one. There's No Such Thing as a Fish by the makers of QI. But then, sort of far as radio is concerned, every time I get in the car, I will always turn the radio off, much to my dad's annoyance. But actually, I found more recently, like when I've been doing coach journeys and stuff, I've actually quite enjoyed listening to the radio. The other day, I had Simon and Joe's Request Hour, and I think that was really nice. You get a big variety of songs, whereas if I just put my playlist on, it's songs that I know. So I actually quite enjoyed having a bit of discussion and then a song. A bit of discussion and a song. And therefore it was songs that I might not normally choose but I actually do enjoy and did know. So
it's nice
I think
to have the unexpected sometimes.
Yeah. So I think that Friday night on BBC Radio 2 was pretty good, and I would recommend.
BBC Radio 2. Brilliant.
So TV. We'll go Tom this time. TV.
I'm gonna have to do something that I've watched recently, and I think it's The Good Place. I think that's like, for me, that's up there as one of my favourites at the moment. It kind of like comedy and also a little bit of ethics. I quite like that, and I think from people that would have listened to our veggie veganism and meat eating podcast, I probably talk a bit about that a bit too much. So it's nice to have that outlet in a TV show that I don't have to bore people with constantly.
In a quite light-hearted way as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's not heavy hitting, and it's really well put together, and I think it's a really good concept.
Yeah, excellent. Go on, Chris. You go next.
Well, mine is the greatest TV show that was ever made.
Here we go.
Obviously Downton Abbey. I think it is a brilliant TV show, and I think for me it sort of marks almost when TV really started happening as quite a big thing.
Oh my lord!
I think, and I think like there's lots of other obviously great TV shows, and I mean like obviously Game of Thrones is another one that's been massive and very. But I mean, as far as sort of a British TV show is concerned, Downton Abbey has just gone everywhere, and I love it. I think it's
never watched a single episode ever.
Yeah, I've read, I think, every single book you can read around Downton Abbey. I've watched Downton Abbey, all the series. I must have watched series 1 at least 5 times.
Chris will be appearing on Mastermind with his specialist subject of Downton Abbey.
Love it. So I think, yes, Downton Abbey, by far, my favourite TV show.
Fair enough. Oh gosh, it's my turn. See, I don't really absorb TV as much.
You meant to watch it.
Thanks, Tom. Cheers for that. I don't just sit there and like trying to eat the corner of my TV. Let's put that out there.
Soak in the rays of the TV.
But no, I find TV quite easy to forget. So I think one of my all-time favourite TV series is probably Monty Python's Flying Circus. I'm a big comedy fan, and especially British comedy. I'm not so keen on American TV shows. There's just something about British comedy, and that for me, I mean, there's a whole load of rubbish in there. Like, not all their comedy is gold, but the bits that are gold are pure genius, I think. And it's something that I grew up watching with my dad, so you've got those kind of familial memories with it. And for me, it's just something I can turn to when I'm feeling a bit down, and it just picks me up. And it's so silly as well, and I've got a really silly sense of humour sometimes. And yeah, I just love that about it.
Fair enough. And finally, film. So I think, for me, if we were making this podcast in maybe a few months' time, I could say that my favourite film was the Downton Abbey film.
Are you that confident it's going to be that good? If it comes out now and it's a total flop, what are you going to do?
No, I think it's always difficult when you take TV and try and make a film. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm intrigued.
Film-wise, my favourite, I think, a film that really stood out for me and I absolutely loved was Shakespeare in Love. I wouldn't say it's my sort of all-time favourite, but I just thought it was a brilliant film. It was, like, obviously, as a theatre student, I like Shakespeare, and that side, although it's not 100% factual, was just fun.
Not 100% factual. Hang on a second.
But I mean, it was fun seeing sort of the intertextuality, and the story's great, and it's funny, and it's cute, and I mean, Judi Dench won an Oscar for 8 minutes of work.
I mean, that 8 minutes was a phenomenal piece of acting.
Just brilliant. So I think, Shakespeare in Love would be a film that I'd definitely go back to. I wouldn't say it's maybe my absolute favourite, but it's definitely up there. It's one of the best.
Fair enough.
Tom?
I'm going to go with, again, it's one that I've seen recently, so I can't say for certain that it's definitely my favourite, because I can't remember that far back, but I'm going to go with Call Me By Your Name. It was a Oscar contender from last year, and it really got me. And it's like one of those films that is a really slow build up, and it kind of starts to crank things, and as the film goes on, you start getting more and more tense, and towards the end, it's such a well constructed and well made film, especially because it's an adaptation from a book as well. So the fact that they managed to turn that and do such justice to it, I think was really, really good.
Yeah, it was a good film. So, finally, me. I've got to go, it's a bit cliched, but I think my favourite film of all time has got to be Hot Fuzz. It's such a cult classic, but it's something I can just keep going back to. I think I have on one occasion watched it twice in a row. I just love it so much. It's just so funny. And I think it's very different from their other films as well, in that Simon Pegg, who is a Bristol University alumni, got photos of him in our theatre department. He plays such a serious part in that, and normally in the other two films that they did, you see him kind of joking around, but that contrast between him and Nick Frost in that film is just hilarious, and I think the storyline is great. It's just, comedy classic. Boom, 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 mind the flat. Boom, boom, boom.
Tom, I think you can kick us off. You're going to be you've looked a bit about radio, podcasts. Why do you think they're great? Let's not say, we'll see whether we get to sort of which is best, but let's say, why would you say that radio and podcasts are great?
I'd probably say, something along the lines of what you said earlier on. I mean, specifically with regards to radio, I'm not particularly talking about podcasts because I feel like they're a different medium, but radio specifically is really good for getting things out there that you wouldn't have heard before. And I think the thing with radio is it needs to stop being seen as like a content platform now. I think it's very much like a distribution channel. Like, you don't go necessarily to radio to listen to music, but you go there to find out about music, to have the music curated for you. It's a different experience to putting on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever. And I think that, people saying that radio is dying is a little bit unfounded, because radio isn't the same as streaming services, and therefore it shouldn't try to be the same. And I think that applies for like talk radio and that sort of thing as well. Like, Radio 4, for instance, they put the programs on in very specific orders for a reason, and it's curated and it's designed by people. It's not picked out by an algorithm, and I think having that human touch is still quite a useful thing.
Yeah, I think I listened to some very interesting dramas on BBC Radio 4 when we were on our 27-hour journey to Croatia. Me and his dad had downloaded a few, and yeah, they were enjoyable. I think there is something about, definitely I think when travelling, for me especially, I can't watch anything, so sort of having a TV screen or watching a film would be a nightmare while travelling, but actually the radio, I think there is something quite soothing and interesting to listen to.
I think as well is that when you put a podcast on, you're putting that on, and so you're demanding your attention.
Yeah.
Whereas when you put the radio on, you feel less guilty tuning out and not listening to it, and also you can't then go back and rewind. And so if you miss something, you miss something, and so you're not committed to it in the same way that you are with a podcast. So for me, when I travel, I listen to a podcast, but I feel like sometimes that's detrimental because I don't allow myself to stop listening to it. I'm constantly listening to it, and that can be a bit draining sometimes. That could just be me.
You get big names in radio as well. Like, I think people forget how big radio stars are. Like Nick Grimshaw, Matt Edmonds, like talking about BBC Radio now because they're the only ones I know really. But like, they are big household names really, and they are good at what they do. And that's, as you're saying, it is a specific genre. And they are good in that area, and they earn a lot from it.
I think area. And I think as well another point is that like when TV came in, radio didn't die. Like TV came in and radio, it's a different platform, and so like people continued watching TV and continued listening to the radio for different reasons. And so the fact that other like streaming services and also like YouTube has taken up like a lot of it as well in terms of like music videos and that sort of thing. And then podcasts for that more like audio side of it rather than the music side. You're definitely getting a different experience, and so I don't feel like radio's going to be going anywhere anytime soon.
So I just wonder, because obviously, my nanan always puts the radio on when she's in the kitchen, and it might either be live or she's got a recording that they've taped off the radio and they're listening to it. The Archers, for example, stuff like that.
Wow.
Classic.
That's sort of what she does. The radio is important there. Now, I am rubbish at listening to anything while doing anything else. I might now and then put some music on, but just sort of in our flat, I noticed that, I know Amy, you and James, you often bring TV in to the kitchen with you, and sometimes TV is sort of by the sink as you're washing up, and sort of TV is that companion to what you're doing. And so has that role of radio gone? That whereas before houses had the radio and it was sort of always there, now we seem to talk about it much more of, well, when we're travelling we stick it on, it's in the car, but what access do we have to radio sort of day to day?
To be fair, I think I bring music in more often than I do TV, because as you say, I do struggle to watch something and wash up at the same time, but like listening to something is so much easier. And when I had like a little part-time job over the summer, I used to listen to podcasts. That's when I started listening to podcasts, because it was so much easier than like your attention is so much more divided if you're because you have like when you watch something you watch it and listen, whereas it's only using one sense when you're. So I think it's definitely not dead.
I mean, the radio has gone from there. You're listening to music.
This is true, yeah.
Podcast, sort of everyone having a radio in their house, that when they've not got anything, when they're doing something, just switch the radio on. I think that has gone.
But the thing is, they're like Radio 4, for instance, they put podcasts up, so they obviously they kind of premiere their podcasts on the radio, and then you can find them and re-listen to them at any point. Like Infinite Monkey Cage with Brian Cox is up there. You've got like loads of comedy from like Dead Riggers and that sort of thing. That's all on Radio 4, but it's also broadcast as a podcast, and so it's going back to the same thing. It's like it's a different medium. Like if you want to listen to the radio to find something new, then you can. But if you just want to listen to something that you know you like and you want to listen to it episode after episode, obviously the podcast format is the right format. And so I think it's just like the idea that there's a differentiation there between the two types of thing that you're listening to.
But how many people do you think still go to radio to find that something new? Or are we just being are we now, especially sort of the younger generation, is it just, here's Spotify, we're going to give you what you want to listen to, as opposed to that more, I'll see what this is like.
I feel like for us in particular, because obviously we're at university, none of us are driving. Like that I think that plays a big part into it. Like it doesn't feature into our lives because we don't have, like, one of the most popular ways that people listen to the radio is in their car, and we don't drive anywhere around here. Whereas if we were commuting on a daily basis for half an hour or whatever in our car, that's probably the best kind of time, because you're not, especially in the morning, like, you're not quite awake. You don't want to commit to something, so you probably just pop the radio on and have a listen to what's on, and that's where you have things introduced. I think breakfast viewing for radio is huge. Well, not viewing, but breakfast listening for radio is huge, and that's substantially their biggest time of the day. And so, I think, like, especially in that domain, I don't think it's going anywhere.
Fair enough.
Right.
Well, Amy.
Hello.
On to the world of film.
On to the world of film. So, I think in contrast to TV and radio, film is kind of more like an art form. I feel it's kind of gained it's an art form, it's gained that prestige, but it has, like, if you look at the Oscars, it tends to be, and it is quite elitist in some manners, but then you've got that area of film. I feel like it's a very broad range, because you've got the films that are typically arty, and then you've also got films that everyone has access to, like we were talking about Nativity the other day, like, nice family film, but it would never be nominated for an Oscar because that's not the point. And I feel like you get such a wide variety of films. They've got massive budgets in the film industry in some instances. Obviously not all films have massive budgets, but again, playing into that variety.
But do you think film has variety now? I think film gets now so caught up in branding, and so that so often you go to the cinema, it's another Marvel film, it's a DC film, it's a Star Wars film, that film has almost stopped being creative and it's now just driven by franchises.
I think that it makes it less of an art form as well, when you know that it's not a self-contained film. For me, the good thing about film is that it's often a self-contained story. You have, you're going into it, you have that duration of time, and when you come out of it, you've had that entire experience. It's like reading a novel or something like that, like a one-time, not a trilogy or anything like that. Yeah. But now you go into a film and you can't feel, regardless of how kind of arty the film is or whatever, like, I can't shake that feeling of coming out and being like, well, is that it though? Is there going to be another instalment? I feel like I've lost that ability to just live with the fact that is all I'm going to get from that, and that is contained within that area. I can never get past the fact that there might be a sequel or a prequel or whatever.
But I don't think all films are like that. Like, the big budget films that are kind of popular in the public eye, I agree with you. Like, Fantastic Beasts, we were having a discussion about that the other day, and I was saying it's gone very franchised with the whole Harry Potter industry. Still great stories, but, like, there's something about it I don't like, and I agree with you about that franchise. But I think especially small independent films have that uniqueness and do have that arty factor that should be celebrated. And, like, even films that get nominated for Oscars, like if you look at 3 Billboards, I don't think there's ever going to be a sequel to that, because that is why it's unique. And like I was saying, you get this massive variety in the film industry. Of you get those blockbuster films that go on and make sequels and prequels, etc. Like Downton Abbey, for example. The Downton Abbey film is sprung off a TV series, but then if you want to delve deeper, then there are those self-contained films as well that will never be.
But do you not get variety in TV?
Yeah, I think TV does have that variety, but again, like, you can have the same argument with different series. Like, for me, I loved Downton Abbey when it started, and I still watched it right up until the end, but I feel like in the last 2 series, it got tired, and I think you've got more chance of doing that in TV through the nature of episodes than you have in film.
I feel like, though, potentially with TV, it's more of a gradual thing. It, like, starts to fade out and starts to lose its prominence, whereas with film, you can hit the wrong chord so easily. I mean, just look at the Star Wars prequels.
This is true.
It only takes one bad film, whereas if you have one bad episode, not necessarily going to be the end of the series and whatnot, and you can kind of make up for that, and you can more easily adapt based on the criticism of that episode. Whereas with the film, if you hit the wrong chord with the film, that's such a substantial portion of the whole thing that could go quite wrong for the filmmakers.
But you're talking in terms of like franchises now, aren't you? And sequels.
Yeah.
But like that doesn't detract from the original as such. Like if the sequel is bad, then it doesn't take any enjoyment away from the original.
I feel like for me it does though. I feel like it kind of tarnishes the image of the original. Like I love Star Wars, and I love watching the original trilogy, but something about it it's almost cheapened by the prequels. And I know that's a really like almost pretentious way of looking at it, but there's something about seeing the way that the originals were made, and it just feels a little bit less special now. And I think it like that.
Yeah.
That really like
they've done it to death.
Yeah, and you feel like even watching the ones that I really enjoy, it's like, oh, it's just this again. It's just the same thing again. It's just silly men in capes with big laser things. And I loved it, and now it's just like that special spark has been taken away by the fact that they've released so many films.
We can say that yes, film has variety, TV has variety, TV can go too far, film can go too far. But what other things do you think there are that sort of distinguish film, not just content? Obviously, the medium of film, the way we enjoy film is very different to TV. Does that make it better, worse?
Yeah, I think, like Tom was saying, it's this whole self-contained thing. Like TV, you've got to keep going back to, which is great to have that long stretch. But film, I think you go into a film and you know you're going to spend an hour and a half, 2 hours watching one thing, and then you move on with your life.
And I think film also has the advantage of the cinema.
Oh,
I think we
absolutely.
shouldn't sort of forget, and I think film obviously with Netflix and Amazon is more moving into the home, but I think lots of people do find something very enjoyable about the cinema.
Yeah, definitely.
You walk out, you sit down, the lights go off, your phones are off, you've not got the outside world, that you just purely focus on this on this film, the screen, and you just watch it. And you have that complete disconnection from the rest of the world. I think that is something that really makes film stand out.
That's the thing for me. Like as you were saying that, I was just thinking of the disconnection, like being able to unplug yourself. You don't really get that much, and you definitely don't get it at all with TV. But yeah, there's not much that goes on in your life where you can just sit and focus on something with the knowledge that there is no distraction that's going to come along. You can just focus on this one thing, and that's it for the hour and a half, 2 hours that you're watching.
Yeah, I also think more is thrown at film because of that length of time. Like if you look at Game of Thrones, for example, their last series, it's been revealed that they're spending like over an hour on each episode, and I think that just shows that there's this drive towards spending a lot more money on that, which isn't always necessarily better.
The thing is how you distinguish a film from a TV series. I mean, the TV series, episodes of Downton Abbey last for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Like their Christmas specials are an hour and a half. But you would not say, if you could maybe, if you watch one on its own, it's a standalone film. But it is part of that TV series. And I think Game of Thrones getting longer, it's still a TV series.
Yeah,
this is
true.
And so,
but does that not show that like it's still a TV series, but it's emulating the genre of film? And what does that say about film versus TV? Is there more scope in film?
But then equally, does the
things?
franchise of films emulate TV? I think that you can flip them both ways. That a TV series has so much more time to develop characters. I think you can get so much more out of a story. You can take your time with it. You feel, I think, so much more connected to characters. And I think, and this is why I don't like Netflix and Amazon with the episodes all being out at once. I think that actually ruins TV, in my opinion, because what you're then doing is you're watching a really, really long film,
but with weird jumps in the middle as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
It's like the fact that like TV is still created to go on TV weekly or whatever, and so there are still natural breaks between each episode. I feel it's quite disjointed actually watching a TV series one after the other on Netflix, because you do get this natural peak and trough in the actual episode itself, then it ends and then it starts again and it's up and down. Whereas with a film, you can kind of sit there and you get to experience that across a period of time that is longer, and then it's done.
I think that's the thing, but it's then how much can you get out of that? For me, you watch a TV series, you're with this character for months potentially. Some TV series, if you have say 10 episodes in a series, one episode a week, that's 10 weeks of your life. You've followed this person. And I think this to me is, I was reading an article and someone said that TV brings people together and film divides. And I think that's a really interesting way of putting it. You go to see a film and everyone sort of comes out with their opinion. I think this and stuff. TV has this way of bringing people together. I mean, Bodyguard on BBC.
Yeah.
That really brought back scheduled TV. I think this idea of one episode a week, the excitement, the build-up, and people were talking about it. Everyone. The news. Everywhere you went, people were saying, oh, what do you think is going to happen? And I think Love Island, on a much smaller scale, and a very different sort of TV show, does that as well. It brings young people together. People are discussing what's happening, what's going to happen in the next episode. And I think TV has this much more sort of community around it than film. And where film has that community, it's because it's emulating TV in as much as it's creating a series. But I don't think you get the same thing in standalone films. You go to see a film, people come out, they have their opinions on it, and that's that. TV is a much more sort of bringing people together.
I guess one thing I've got an issue with TV though is that the whole like spoiler thing, like I feel like that stops people from being able to talk about it so openly, because especially for me, like I'm worried that I'm going to spoil something for someone, so I kind of keep it hush, and then it stops the discussion a little bit more. Whereas film, it's like you're either going to watch it or you're not, and like the spoilers often tend to be less important because you've not built up that relationship with someone.
I think that's the thing with TV. It has to be watched together, and I think that's the balancing act of releasing lots of shows so people can watch, but also knowing that people are so much busier now. People do watch TV on their own time. And I think that was something that was very special about The Bodyguard. It brought people 9 o'clock on a Sunday. You sat down and you watched it, and I think you had a very similar thing with Line of Duty. I didn't watch it, but there was lots of talk about what was happening at the end of series 4, I think. You've got those things, and I think that's...
But can you not have that with film as well? Like, I prefer watching films with other people. Like last year, for example, we watched Call Me By Your Name, and Tom and I loved it, and you didn't.
I did not.
No, but I think debate over preferences isn't a bad thing. I think that can bring us together, because we were still communally discussing this experience. And just because you watch a TV series all together doesn't mean you all have that same feeling about it.
But no, I'm not saying you don't even have to watch it together in the same room. I'm saying at the same time, in as much as so that you don't get spoilers.
Yeah.
So, but I think TV series, because of their length, they occupy much more of people's lives. I mean, you spoke about Call Me By Your Name maybe for a week afterwards.
Yeah.
How much talk about Love Island was going on?
Yeah, but does that? I don't think that necessarily makes it better. I think Love Island was great, but I don't feel like necessarily the fact that people are talking about it for longer makes it a better thing.
Fair enough.
I think like ultimately they're different mediums, and so it's hard to just say a film is better than a TV show.
Yeah.
But I feel like a film could be really good for a short period of time, but it doesn't need to be any more than that. And I feel like with a TV show, you kind of, it's almost like an obligation for the people making the TV show that they keep people watching for longer, and so it's almost like a burden rather than an actual a positive of TV that it's necessary to keep these people watching this long.
And I suppose you can you can stop watching a TV series halfway through, and I've done that in the past. It's the same with a book. Like, you can reach halfway through a book and then you get distracted and you never end up coming back to it. Whereas with a film, I feel like you do sit and you watch the whole thing because it is that contained period of time.
Yeah. But again, you might not have enjoyed the whole thing. You might have wanted to walk out.
You can.
Yeah.
You can always. Stop.
That's the thing.
I think with TV, it's a lot of the time it's less that you don't want to continue watching, but that you feel like you've kind of your interest is waned because of the time. Whereas with a film, like, if you don't want to watch it, you can stop watching it. And if you want to watch it, you continue watching it because you know how much time it's going to take out of your life. Whereas with a TV show, it's like, oh, there's this commitment that, like, I don't know when it's going to finish. Do I really want to continue watching it? It might continue for another few years, and then I've got to, actually, I'm going to stop. And so I think, like, yeah, definitely it's got that weird, that different aspect of the fact that you've really got to commit to and pay attention for longer. I guess it all comes back to, in a way, what I said at the beginning is that, like, they're kind of just different mediums.
Yeah.
And so they have different strengths and they have different weaknesses, but ultimately, like, they're there to do different things. They have different jobs, and so radio, I don't think radio can be said to be better than film in a blanket statement, or film can be better than TV in a blanket statement. I feel like you have to look at individually what they're trying to achieve.
And I think then problems often arise in sort of the discussion we talked when film tries to emulate TV or TV tries to emulate film. They're sort of trying to compete with each other when they sort of do need to go to different places.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Right. Well, I feel like that's the end of this week's podcast.
Brilliant.
Thanks for a lovely discussion, guys.
That was good fun.
Boom, boom, boom. Thank you very much for listening.
If you want to get in contact, you can find us on Facebook. We're Mind the Flat Podcast.
On Twitter, we're at mindtheflat_pod.
On Instagram at mindtheflat_podcast.
And if you want to respond to anything we've said in this episode or suggest a topic for another week, you can head to our Reddit, that's r/mindtheflat, and have your say there, or you can drop us an email at mindtheflatpodcast@gmail.com.
Boom, boom, boom.